Hello, Internet, and welcome to this my US travel diaries number 6. A diary that will take us from San Francisco until Las Vegas with a few days spent in between. So, yeah, let's move on with it. Enjoy. When we last left our heroes, i.e., me and my father, we were in San Francisco, having seen the city on a one of the sort of hub on bus tours, which was actually a really good thing. We had even seen the Golden Gate Bridge in the sunlight without any fog, which was actually the only time I've been in San Francisco and had that happen to me. Anyway, the next stage would take us over several stops on the way and over several days from San Francisco to Las Vegas. Now, on the way down through California, where our first stop was at a place called Santa Maria, we wanted to see Monterey Aquarium. It's not a secret that I have a aquarium fetish. I won't call it a fish fetish, but I really like, because that's not really the point, but I really like visiting various aquariums, and I heard very, very good things about the aquarium in Monterey. So we took a short detour and went there. And we got our first shock of the trip, because it was $30+ for each of us to get in, which we back then felt was quite high amount of pay to see a bunch of fish. And in fact, to honestly, I still feel it's a high amount to see a bunch of fish. We got in, and I must admit I was incredibly disappointed. The main sort of deep sea tank was amazing. There was some jellyfish and others that was worth watching. The problem is that Monterey Aquarium, at least in 2010, was set out in a way that there are more things dedicated to entertain children than to allow people to actually watch sea life. So there's probably about, half of it dedicated to actual marine life and half of it to can you run as fast as a seal, etc., etc., etc. So after having seen it and enjoyed what we could, we left again, going south to Santa Maria for this day's stop. It was also at Santa Maria that we decided that we were fairly close to Solvang, the Danish sort of enclave in California, and decided that as good Danes we would have to go visit it. So we did, and then we realized that we were just about the 4th of July and the town was overfilled with people, and also that it had as much to do with Denmark as a cliffside monastery in Bhutan. So apart from a few design choices and one Danish bakery, well, at least we can save that we've been there. The next day, moving towards Barstow, where our next stop would be, we wanted to go see a place where apparently you can see the St. Andreas fault fairly clearly from the surface. Sadly, we missed the entrance to the park where it was supposed to be, and instead suddenly found ourselves right out in sort of the mountainous, or at least hillside areas of rural California. And before we knew it, we were in what is one of my favorite towns in California, namely Taft. Why Taft is so interesting? Because it is probably the biggest oil town I've ever seen. Apparently there's about 3,000 or 5,000 people living there, and there's about one person not involved in the oil business, and I saw more oil wells in the area around Taft than I have seen in the rest of my life. Again, it's not a big thing, just driving around that area, I found it amusing. I found it interesting to see how California is also when you get out of the larger city areas. Beyond that, we of course drove through the Mojave Desert on the way to Barstow, which is the first time I sort of really saw an American desert, since my previous trips, as you know, had been over eastwards and towards the Mississippi. So that was a very, very interesting experience for me, and I was very keen on taking pictures as much as you could from the car window, since we were on the interstate. After all, I got a lot of Joshua Tree pictures that probably means that I will one day go to Joshua Tree National Park. Everyone tells me there's something I cannot miss for the rest of my life, but it won't be for the trees because I have plenty of pictures even from that trip. We did arrive at Barstow, however, and found our motel, a Best Western at the time. And we got a room, and then we saw, this is probably my favorite thing of all time. Every bath towel and whatever else was there was folded into the shape of an elephant. Sadly, I've lost most of my pictures from it, but it was absolutely amazing. It took us, we actually discussed whether or not to go out and buy bath towels for the next day, simply so we didn't have to unfold these very cute little things. It was also in Barstow we went to see Calico Ghost Town, an old silver mining town now put off, of course, as a tourist attraction, but used to be an actual ghost town for quite a while after hosting nearly 10,000 people during the silver rush of the 19th and early 20th century. If you are in the area, I think you should go watch that. I have been to several other quote-unquote ghost towns around the southwest, but to a certain degree, Calico is still one of the most interesting ones I have ever seen. The small train that runs around, just everything, the fact that most of it is still actually in ruins, while some of it has been rebuilt. It's actually really, really good, and I suggest everyone go watch it. Next day, we were going to pass on to Las Vegas. However, we weren't going to take the direct route across the interstate. We did follow it for a while, seeing the amazing Sussex road sign that will probably pop up as a picture later. But a bit more than a third of the way, we turned into the Death Valley National Park area. I always wanted to see Death Valley. It's supposed to be, after all, well, it's Death Valley. And since, interestingly enough, since we came in from the south, we actually missed the visitor area and some of the more touristy spots until the very, very end. So the first thing I really saw about Death Valley, except the, just general area, was Badwater Basin, the lowest point of the continental United States, almost 300 feet below sea level, and as you can see on the current picture, just basically a very large, very, non-existent lake bed. Well, the lake bed is very existent, the water isn't, although if there is heavy rainfall, it might actually become a lake for a while before drying out again. It was also in Death Valley area that we suddenly, in the middle of nowhere, found ourselves on about a 6-8 mile long, very straight, very flat road with absolutely no one else around. Now, this is not an unknown occurrence in the United States, especially out west. However, again, this was my trip out west, and as you might remember, we had been upgraded to a then very late model sports car, the Chevy Camaro. So, it did say something about speed limit being enforced by airplanes, but since there wasn't an airplane within sight, I'm sorry, American traffic police, we might possibly have broken the speed limits just a tiny bit on that particular road. Anyway, we saw the rest of Death Valley, buying our yearly National Park Pass at the Visitor Center, a thing that would serve us in very good stead and has, of course, served us in very good stead during later vacations as well, before leaving the park at the eastern entrance, going over where it comes out right next to Area 51. No, we did not get adopted by aliens, we tried. And then moving south towards Las Vegas, passing through, of course, the town of Pahrump, which was, again, one of those things where I, for the first time, saw an interesting Americanism. You got to remember that my country, Denmark, is probably about the size of Vermont and New Hampshire put together, and here we saw a town of maybe, 70,000 inhabitants? Something like that. That was spread out over more than possibly 20 or 40 miles. It was like, there was no buildings above one story, and it was just like very, 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 very long. Again, not an unknown occurrence in the United States, but the first time I really saw that sort of thing. We arrived in Las Vegas, however, and got our rooms at the Stratosphere Hotel, of which, of course, you see the famous Stratosphere Tower in the current picture. So, why were we in Las Vegas? Well, amusingly enough, it wasn't actually to gamble. I personally don't find gambling all that interesting, and my dad, if he even did any gambling, certainly did it on his own while I wasn't around, and certainly not for all that many money. We were there to see the town, because, the city, because, hey, you have got to see Las Vegas when you're there. Later on other visits we would do more, but this was actually just to see the town. First evening, see the city during the evening. Second evening, see it during the day. Possibly, maybe even catch a show or some description if we can find one that wasn't completely sold out. And yeah, maybe take one spin on the roulette or whatever. It wasn't going to go that way. However, the first night was there, and the first evening was there, and we got some food at a lovely little Indian restaurant where we were probably the only white people around who didn't speak Indian, only spoke English. So that was an interesting experience, but the food was very, very good, and we were, of course, received as family because, well, we probably weren't the only one in that restaurant that weren't actually family. But that was when my father said, well, it's evening and the lights are on and it's Las Vegas. We have got to see the town. Because he'd been there a couple of years earlier with my mother and wanted to show me the strip during nighttime. So what do? Well, as you know, Stratosphere, or may not know, Stratosphere is at the one end of the strip, and at the other is the MGM Grand. There are some other sort of casino hotels outside of that, but that's the strip proper, from MGM Grand to the Stratosphere, and there's a monorail running between those two hotels with various stops on the way. And that monorail we took down to MGM Grand, and my father said, okay, now we walk back to Stratosphere. Now, as you may have remembered, my father's ideas of how long such a trip might be from the San Francisco debacle is not as accurate as one might have hoped, and as you might have imagined, my feet weren't exactly healed from the San Francisco experience. But hey, it wasn't that long, and I trust my father, and it might be interesting, so we started walking. At this point, it was maybe about 10 p.m. in the evening, but this is Las Vegas in July, so if the temperature had actually slipped below 100 degrees, I would be incredibly surprised. And I had half a bottle of water, because, hey, I hadn't actually expected that he would do this to me again. And while water was plentiful, about halfway down the strip, I was, once more, getting a bit, perhaps, what is the word I'm looking for? Testy with my father's choice of divertment. And again, he was probably fortunate that we were walking at a sidewalk very far away from the cars, because yes, as my feet basically at this point felt like one major gaping blister, I would happily have thrown him into traffic and just, laughed about it. I might in fact have caused a minor scene on the strip by basically telling him in a perhaps bit louder voice than was strictly necessary that when he had an idea of, going back to the monorail and skipping the rest of the trip, that he could go screw himself. We were going to do this if it killed me, but after this I wouldn't take a single suggestion of his for the rest of the trip, since he obviously didn't have my best interest at heart. Or, words to that effect. Eventually, however, after a while, we did arrive after the several mile long trip back at the Stratosphere, and instead of going down to the casino to just walk around and catch the atmosphere as planned, I basically went up to a room, put my very sore feet in water, put a bunch of anti-blister bandages on it, and went to bed. While my father did, after all, see and take a few pictures at the casino floor until he was kicked out for taking pictures, or rather, sent to his room and told not to do it again. Okay, next day we were supposed to be seeing Las Vegas, and we had agreed, okay, your feet hurt, we'll just take the monorail to wherever we want to go into a hotel, see it, take a monorail again, and so on and so forth. Except that we found out that my father had lost his asthma medication, and that was at the time very, very important for him. Fortunately, the need has diminished somewhat over the years, but back then it was a big thing. Now, where was it? Well, we called around a bit and eventually discovered that we had left it at the hotel in Barstow. So what to do? Well, we could have it overnighted, except that the next day we wouldn't be in Las Vegas anymore, and we wouldn't know what hotel we were going to be staying at, because we didn't even know where we were basically going, except southwards into Arizona. So the day where we were supposed to have seen Las Vegas in daylight and done all the interesting stuff, nope. We spent 7 hours on the motorway because there was a lot of traffic accidents, driving back to Barstow, picking up my father's medicine, then driving back to Las Vegas. So in the end, what did we see that day? Well, we saw the view from the Stratosphere Tower, which was very interesting, and we saw the dinner at a Hard Rock Cafe. That was our experience in Las Vegas. So yeah, thanks, Dad. That was an interesting time we had there. All right, that was it. This was that particular stage of the trip. The next time we will be going all through Arizona in various stages, stopping at Tombstone, almost getting arrested as Mexican border runners further south, and trying to figure out what to do in Payson, and finally ending up in the Great Grand Canyon. So there we are then. The second time on that particular trip, my dad decided to try to kill me with walking tours. Interesting parts, again, in rural California. There's some stuff there around Taft and just the California interior that I actually find very, very interesting and really want to go back and take another look at when I get the chance. I did sort of have the chance during the 13 trip, but I really want to go back and root around again. So yeah, I also saw Las Vegas, even though, as you can see, my first trip there wasn't exactly auspicious. Father! However, the rest of the trip was actually going to go a lot better, and the only sort of real walking problems we had would be in Arches National Park later, which I shall return to then. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, it might take some time before we get on to the next one, but by then it will be our round trip in Arizona. So until next time, I have been the Sage, and I wish you all a very happy day.